So I'm going to start with a quick little bio. My name is Ryan Whited. I authored a book with Matt Fitzgerald recently. We finished it up. And it began, how that process began was I gave this talk back in 2019, or an iteration of this talk back in 2019. The title of my talk was still Pain and Performance at that point. I've been giving some form of this talk since I think 2017. Matt was present that evening. He was attending Rob Carr's run camp. Rob's camp works with us, and it happened to be that night that I was giving one of these talks. So I am I've been a trainer for about 30 years. My dad was a professional racehorse jockey for about 35 years. I also was a sponsored athlete for around 20 years. I've been entrenched in elite athletics for most of my life. And thankfully, I've made a career of it. I've gotten to work with folks from, gymnasts to elite runners to elite climbers to people that just love to hike and get outside and ride bikes and those kinds of things. I'm very thankful for the role that I've gotten to live. So it actually was that passion that led me into working with a lot of folks that struggle with getting through injury or pain. So that is a bit of my background. So a little disclaimer here. I am not a medical professional. I do work with a lot of folks that have been struggling with injury or struggling with pain. But if there is a medical issue of any sort, then obviously we seek a doctor's counsel. Our objectives for the evening are how to interpret, contextualize, and reduce pain, how to continue training with and through pain appropriately, and how to use pain as a tool. I wrote off to the side there. This is just something that I probably will wrap up with as well as a reminder. But there is no map to this process. You can think of it as we have a compass we can get through, but there is no map. It is something that is just a process. It takes some time. I also said honey comes with bees, and that is because as living humans, and most of us are athletes, we all know that pain and injury are just a part of our process. It's funny because we've tried to eliminate it in so many ways. In some ways, I feel like that might have caused more problems than helped. So we need to start by defining some terms. Because there's a lot of misunderstanding about pain and other things that we might discuss tonight. I like to use this little tool called the illusion of explanatory depth. So this kind of helps bring it to your face, so to speak. Gives it right up close when you ask somebody, how a microwave works, something we use all the time. That you have this sense that you understand it because you use it all the time. But in all honesty, if most of us would not be able to answer, how does a microwave work if we were pressed? And the same is true with pain. But the difference being is with a microwave, it is not that costly if you don't understand how it works. But with pain, it can be very costly. You are going to make some of our biggest life decisions around the notion of how pain works. You'll decide, at some point maybe to have a surgery, thinking that you understand how the pain works, or when to bow out of a competition, or when to stop running, or when to stop your activities, because we think we might understand how pain works. But pain does not necessarily work like we think. There's a lot of discussion amongst some specialists about what is pain. So if I were to ask you guys, is it a sensation? Is it something, that is information that is sent into your brain or sent into you? Um, is it reflective of damage? Is it a perception? Um, is it a habit? Is it extremely complex? I'm going to go with that one. So that previous picture was of the nervous system that you saw on the right. Those were nerves that I showed a picture of. Um, and some of those free nerve endings are called nociceptors. So we have nerve endings, throughout our system. And at one point, we thought that nociceptors were pain receptors. And I'm sure that there are still quite a few medical professionals that believe that nociceptors are pain receptors. I don't doubt that at all, actually. Um, so, but nociceptors just send a signal of a possible threat, not necessarily a true indication that something is wrong. You'll see why I use that little barking dog as my nociceptor image in just a second. So this is the definition of pain as defined by the International Association of the Study of Pain. Pain is an unpleasant sensory emotional experience associated with or resembling that associated with actual or potential tissue damage. So just potential tissue damage. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's direct one-to-one representative of damage. So another term that would be helpful to define, we tend to conflate pain with injury. I hear it all the time. And it's really hard to back your way out of that because it's built into our language. It's built into, how we describe. We even say, certain body parts. We say, oh, you have subacromial pain, which honestly, in my humble opinion, that's not a thing. You have pain in your shoulder, but it can't be defined that way. But we should define injury, and this is how the British Journal of Sports Medicine defines it. A physical complaint, which is a little vague, if you ask me, or observable damage to the body and tissue produced by transfer of energy experience sustained by an athlete during participating athletic events and competition. So it's a little loose, how you define injury. The current model that we use of pain is called the Cartesian model of pain. This is a model that Descartes came up with in 1644. Thankfully, we established an entire system of musculoskeletal care around a model from 1644. So I think we've come to understand quite a lot more about pain since then, but it's still the model we're using. But something isn't adding up. And this is a lot of the pain literature, the pain science literature that's come out over the last few years, and even the musculoskeletal literature. That is, like we've looked for answers over and over and over, and a lot of times, at the end of the study, you'll see more inquiry needed. So, because very often it's really hard to pin those things down. 99% of all pain is harmless. That's a made-up statistic. That's not an actual statistic. I just made that up, but it's pretty close to being true also. It is a useful reframing. That's the most value of that. So knowing that pain, most of it is truly harmless, is helpful. I should say, you guys, if anybody has questions, like as we're going along, feel free to ask away. So this is a piece of research that looked at prevalence of abnormal findings in 230 knees of asymptomatic adults. And you can see that they had MRI showed abnormalities in the majority. 97% of the knees that they looked at had abnormalities, but were asymptomatic. And that has to make you think, why are we calling those abnormalities if most of the people have them but are asymptomatic? Should this be how we're basing our care? Should these ideas, be how we're making judgments on when to treat something and how to treat something? This was a study that they looked at elite climbers. This is from Sage Pub. And as you can see, shoulder pathology on MRI in pain-free elite level climbers, 80% had tendonitis, asymptomatic. 79% had subacromial bursitis, and on and on. Labral tears, 57%, 57% humeral pathology, but they were all asymptomatic. I made this little meme off to the side because it's, if you look to explain why a shoulder hurts from the model we're currently using, it's like shooting fish in a barrel. You can take your pick. There's very often something there that you can find. But does that explain why your shoulder hurts? Here's another one. I have so many of these. They're not hard to come by. MRI findings on lumbar spines of asymptomatic elite junior tennis players. You can see, if you zoom in down there, there's almost all of them had some sort of pathology. And the average age was 18 looking at these kids. 62% of them had degenerative disc changes. So if one of these girls had back pain, as a reminder, all of these girls were asymptomatic, but had all of these pathologies. But we just don't look at the asymptomatic population, we look at the symptomatic population. Is pain a sensation? Pain, so if we think of, when I was talking about the free nerve endings that send information into the nervous system, that is sensation. And it is partly sensation. So there is some nociceptive information that some people in my world, in the pain science world, believe that no nociception is necessary, and some believe that some nociception is necessary. And to be honest, I think there's so little that's required that it's not, it's, when you think of phantom limb is kind of the go-to for everybody. So with phantom limb, at some point there was nociception there, but at this point it has changed, but people can still experience significant pain there. And it is purely subjective. Yeah, it is a subjective experience. So for each person. So if one of these girls had back pain at an average age of 18, and they needed to explain why her back hurt, it would be very easy to find something. It's beginning to look like abnormal is pretty normal. So a lot of times people go to get MRIs, and there is a place for imaging. So I don't want to just scare people off and say, there's at no time is it time to get imaging. There is a time when looking at something will help. It is not the norm. It's down the list for sure. But MRI has been shown to be nocivic, meaning it causes more symptoms. So nocebo is the ugly kid brother of placebo. So just go slow when you think it might be time for some images, and take your images with a large pinch of salt. Remember, it's very easy to conflate, to confuse pain as damage. And those two are just separate things. It's really hard to pull them apart in our thinking because it's worked into all of our language and thinking. The fallacy that we committed here, the logical fallacy, is the post hoc fallacy. So the post hoc fallacy is the full name of this post hoc ergo propter hoc. So meaning this, therefore that. So we just assumed, we looked, for the cause in the joint or, in the tissue. So we would look for these abnormalities, but we only looked at the symptomatic population. And obviously that led to some problems. So we committed a pretty serious logical fallacy just beginning to set up our care system. As you can see, Brian is about to make a big mistake. So what I'm saying is pain equals pain. Pain does not equal damage. It is something separate from damage, and it's when we think of treating tissue, it's different than treating pain. The two are just not the same things, and it's a mistake to think of them as the same things. Pathoanatomy is another name for what we use, the current model that we use. So we look for a cause, a tissue. It's like a tissue-centric model of care. So we look for a specific tissue that's causing pain. And to be honest, pain is never singular like that. So it's never a singular thing that's causing pain. So because there are so many factors into a pain experience, so many things that contribute to a pain experience, that it's never a single thing, if that makes sense. I know that's that's a really difficult thing for us to get our heads around sometimes, but they're different things. I love this little quote in the bottom down here. It's like a person with low back pain has been placed by the healthcare system in a labyrinth with no exit. But that person with pain does not know this and continues to engage in the biomedical framework, problem-solving behavior, trying to find the exit. This has been called the perseverance loop of pain. So I know you guys know, going back to that last slide, you don't have to go back, Hannah. I am currently working with somebody that has been through 6 knee surgeries in I think the past 4 years, because they just kept looking for the thing that was causing pain. And that kind of story is this kind of story that just breaks my heart, because she's a runner, she's a mom, and her life has been suspended, her biography has been suspended, and that's the kind of story that honestly just breaks my heart. And it's incredible how common stories like that are. I've worked with so many athletes that have either stopped running because they think they're hurting themselves, uh, or been gone down the medical route where they've had multiple surgeries, and that's kind of the thing that really like wakes me up in the morning, to keep going and help working with people, because I want to help people back to their way of living. So I mentioned nocebo a second ago, nocebo being the ugly kid brother, like I said, of placebo. So nocebo is a very powerful thing, just like placebo. The language we use around pain is very powerful. It's more powerful than we realize. In the language that we use with others, in the language that our clinicians use with us, the language that our doctors use with us, those all have big impact with us. This was a little piece of research that came out from Ortho Sports Physiotherapy, and it is Sticks and Stones, and that's the title of the article. This is open access, so if you wanted to go and look at it, you can. But it looked at the power of words when working with people. When you say dysfunctional, when you say arthritic, bone on bone, when you say degenerative, when you say, I've had every descriptor known to man when people come in, shared with me from their clinician very often. It's not, I know full well that most folks are out there wanting, if you have gone through the effort to get a degree in something like physical therapy or somewhere in that world, then it's not easy. And so you clearly want to help people. So it's not intentional. It's just part of how we've built our system, to be honest. It's even the billing makes it hard to not use language like that. The words matter. So sticks and stones, this is just another slide with that. Habit or worry or flourish. With such reconceptualization, clinicians will likely remain unaware of the potential harm that their words may hold. As a result, they may continue unknowingly to fertilize pain's vulnerable ground. Okay, next slide, Hannah. We've all heard, very many of us. So I should share also, I had, so I mentioned in the beginning of the talk that I was a sponsored climber for about 20 years. I'm still a climber, boulder. And it was an injury for about a year, pain experience, I should say, that really set me back for about a year. My wife and I were living in our van and traveling and climbing, and I could not get my shoulder pain figured out. I saw quite a few specialists, and I was told that I had, several different dysfunctions and instabilities and all kinds of things. Come to find out, now that I know what I know about pain, I had a lot of life stuff going on in addition to that. And I think probably that had more of a role in why my shoulder hurt than anything else. It has been shown also that if a body part is more valuable to you, so this has been shown with violinists. So if a body part is more valuable to you, the fretting hand of a violinist is more prone to pain because it is highly valuable. And because I'm a climber, obviously my shoulder is probably more prone to pain because of what I do. So that is a part of the psychological contributor. Maybe I shouldn't say psychological because that has some connotation to it. If everybody reflexively, doesn't want to be a psych patient, but we have to just all realize that we all have psychological components to all of our experiences. So it's just how we are. So I was labeled with plenty of dysfunctions, but in the end, I think it was because I had some heavy life stuff going on at the time. So after we talk about words, nocebo, and all the things that you think might that can contribute to pain, when you think about when you go to see somebody, it's like a perfect storm for propagating a pain experience. You have to be shown, this specific structure is what's causing your pain, or this specific dysfunction that you have is what's causing your pain. You feel pretty subjectified because you're taken through a bunch of tests. Very few of those tests actually test the thing that they think it does. There are, I should say, some tests, some musculoskeletal diagnostics that are valuable and are important. And those are the ones, where you think, okay, this is actually something that could be a medical concern. They are by far not the norm. They are way less normal than the norm. But it would be valuable to see a clinician just for that reason, if nothing else, where they can take those actual red flags off the table and reduce some concern around your pain experience. So also, when you get together with most clinicians, then what you're going to get is a set of prescriptive exercises that is specific to that tissue that they think is causing your pain. Be it patellofemoral or Achilles. Everybody is familiar with patellofemoral or Achilles. And sure, like if I end up working with somebody, we will do some exercises in that region, but it's going to be more tailored to you and not to your tissue specifically. So it's a part of it, but your life, your happiness, and the things that bring meaning to your life are way more important than the tissue changing. And the good news is that tissue can stay pathologized and your pain can change. we know this because very often, as we saw just a little bit ago, you can have tendinitis or a pathologized tendon, but have no pain. And knowing that, you can know, oh, pain is a very changeable thing. Many things can influence it, not just the state of your tissue. And that, to me, brings comfort. So I go in a little more on the psychology involved in pain and the cognitive model that a lot of people use is predictive processing. So expectancy is a part of predictive processing. And as you can see, your mind is kind of filling in, or your brain is kind of filling in all those little places between the squares. So it looks like there's movement there. Also, on that checkerboard, you can see the A and the B. The A and the B are actually the same color. My wife still didn't believe me, but I'm telling you, they're the same color. So, but sometimes in attempting to make those predictions, our nervous system can make mistakes. And very often with prediction, if you've had ongoing pain in an area for a very long time, then it's really hard to not lace up your shoes and go out in front of your house and go, well, here we go, we're going to see how this goes, and not to expect a flare up of some sort. And when you tell people not to think about it, full well, this is going to make you focus on it even more. Just realize that it sometimes is that when I said in the beginning, there's a compass, but there's no map. Just know that that's kind of part of the process. But know that you're not damaging something if something does flare up. I think that's comforting to know, and it's a tool to use. Okay, this is an audio illusion that you'll hear right now, and it is some of that predictive processing I'm talking about. You'll listen to somebody saying something, see if you can understand what they're saying, and then it'll play for just a second.
I read the newspaper at lunchtime. The man read the newspaper at lunchtime. I read the newspaper at lunchtime.
So expectation in physiology. So this is a piece of research where they looked at rowers. Oh no, this is a different one. Sorry. This is a VO2 max. And they actually changed their physiology with expectation. They lied to these people that were involved in this study. So they told one participants that they were gifted and some that they were not. And so surprisingly, the ones that they said were gifted actually adjusted their physiology a bit. So the role of expectation even has some physiological spillover. So, which, makes perfect sense in my mind, to be honest. So the wear and tear model is something we have been told for so long. You only have so many flexes in your knee. You only have so many landings in your spine. And it's how I think a lot of people still understand our pain. So, or understand our wear and tear, how our joints change. But I can tell you 100%, you are not a tire. and you have, as you roll, you change. That tire changes, but only in a negative way. It only loses. We adapt, more like the tree to the right. That little guy, there was a windy day, and it was a tough day, I'm sure. But look at him go. You are living. Every 80 to 100 days, your cell turnover is so great that every 80 to 100 days, you create about 30 trillion cells, which is effectively, for most of us, almost a new you. That is a staggering number and nowhere near what a tire is. I'm a Bruce Lee fan, so I borrowed this little image. So the wear and tear wear and tear model is just not accurate. It's a healthier way to think of us as wear and repair. Like when you work out, we do damage muscle, but then we repair it, and that is literally how we build muscle. It's important, and all the adaptations in our tendons and our disc. There's some evidence even that disc of runners become a little more robust because of the adaptation required from bouncing on them. So thinking of us in that way is just much healthier. So pain is a tool. We're going to discuss some ways that you can change pain without needing to change the tissue. So think of pain as a dimmer and not an on-off switch. So it's not, either or, it's if then, and you can work with it. It's much better to work with it and then to reflexively change your behavior. So when you can think, okay, I had a flare up. I tried to run yesterday. It might be worth taking a day off. It might be worth taking a bike ride. There are ways around whatever might be hurting. And I encourage you to kind of try to keep experimenting a bit, go for a walk with a friend, change the terrain, or if you just want to do some exercises that kind of gently push, but don't overreach. What I like to tell people is try to sweet talk the nervous system. Try not to bully the nervous system, if that makes sense. So ways to decrease pain. Yep. Your endogenous opioids. So exercise, you literally create your own opioids with exercise. So it's as good for you, as ibuprofen. It's better actually. So if you can find a way to do that with some friends, that is very helpful. Improved sleep is also very helpful. We know that sleep hygiene is a direct contributor to pain experience. Graded exposure, that's just a fancy way of saying try to gently return to what you want to do, which is basically what I was saying with your running. You can start with run, walk, or change how you run even a bit, the terrain you run on, all of those things. But kind of stay the course. If you just stop, then it's going to end up, it can be even more frustrating. Also, so variation and variability, that is run backwards, those kinds of things, those old school tricks. It's not so much that you're changing tissue, but you're doing something novel. So doing something novel, it distracts you from what you're doing. There's something called the expectancy violation. So where you can interrupt that expectation that you've built in just by doing something novel or by carrying on a conversation with somebody, something like that. There are ways to modulate and work with pain. Also, if it is the case that you have tissue that is damaged, how tissue heals is with use. Obviously, the dosage is no, actually not even for changing pain. I don't think the dosage is like real critical. So, but you want to try to find the right dosage for what your sensitive area will tolerate at the time, if it's a hip or something like that. But movement is a good thing. Rest is rarely the answer. But that is what everybody defaults to. It comes with the wear and tear model. They think, oh, I've hurt myself, and the damaged tissue is what is causing my pain, and it needs to heal. Once it's healed, that pain will go away. But I think we all know that we've all rested and then come back to it and gone, well, that's incredible. It still hurts. In fact, I think it hurts a little worse than when I stopped. And so I try to encourage people, there are little ways to work around that experience that you're going through. Try to stay in it. I know that's not always easy. Try to, even if you can, employ a friend or two to go out with, that would be helpful also. Things that can increase pain. So I've talked a bit about some of these things already, but these are things to kind of watch for. Images, so MRIs, scans of some sort. Like I said before, there is a time when that is absolutely 100% warranted. If you have loss of reflex or lack of sensation or those kinds of things, then yes, that is when some imaging might be warranted. But like I said, that is a medical issue, and that's that. I have this thing that I like to tell people when you're getting a diagnosis. You're not diagnosing your pain, you're diagnosing a medical issue. So a medical issue can be objectively shown. Pain is a subjective experience. So and can't be shown that way. That's why we have such a hard time, with the 1 to 10 of how bad is your pain. That's why it's really hard to scale it for folks. It's hard to measure it for folks. Relationships can be very helpful. If you have a good relationship with somebody that, walking and talking, those kinds of things we know now actually contribute to feeling better in pain. It can bring down some of the fear around it and stuff. So kinesiophobia, after images. Kinesiophobia is the fear of movement, which is a very real thing. If you've been told by 10 different professionals that you are dysfunctional, then you are likely going to be afraid of how you're moving. I worked with somebody the other day that was so afraid of how she was breathing that it created some real problems. But she had been told by a couple clinicians that she was working with that she had a breathing dysfunction, and that was why her back hurt so bad. And so, I really, I try to get people out of their heads when it comes to those kinds of things, and just back to enjoying moving and doing what we do, playing with your kids or grandkids or anything like that, or puppies or whatever. So being afraid of your own movement, if you're working with somebody and you leave feeling afraid of how you move, it might be time to kind of shop around a little bit. Your beliefs, what you believe is causing your pain can contribute to your pain greatly. So your language, we covered that a bit. Rumination, so if worry is a big part of your experience, it can contribute to pain quite a lot also. So, but a lot of these things are really hard to change, and they take some time. And at some point, it might be worth seeing somebody if you struggle long enough and you try. If that somebody is, when I work with folks, I try to tell them as soon as we can high five and you can say, I think I'm good to go. That's our objective. So I don't want to create any sort of dependence or anything like that when working with somebody that's working through a painful situation. It's not the best monetary model, but it's a very good model for caring for somebody. So as soon as I can get somebody to where they feel like they have good agency and can take care of themselves, that's what we try to do. Funny enough, avoidance of an activity can actually drive up your pain experience also. So I worked with somebody a few years ago that had a bike accident, but he was a cyclist, a mountain biker. And anytime he would get back on the bike, actually he had enough fear avoidance around it that he actually avoided it so much that he ended up having some symptoms even just being around cyclists. It was a really interesting case. But how we gently reintroduced riding to him was just that. We literally just gently and slowly changed some of his thinking about things and reintroduced riding, but it did take some time. So language, belief, like I've said before, a lot of the dysfunctions that we get diagnosed with, your slip disc, just heads up, disc don't slip, period. That would be scary if they did that, but they don't. And rest and deconditioning. So things that can contribute. I mean, that sounds kind of counterintuitive, but sometimes there is a time for rest, I should say. Also, there is a time when something gets so bugged or hot and bothered that there is a time just to let it calm down. But what I see very often is people take too much rest, and then they end up being deconditioned, and it ends up a cycle. So this is some of the other psychological factors that I was talking about. My screen is really small. So this is association between stress and injury, prospective cohort study. So 186 first-year contemporary dance students. This study investigated the association between general stress and levels of stress in the first-year contemporary dance studies. Confirmed this hypothesis, indicating that association between stress levels and injury, especially substantial injuries. So this just shows how impactful stress is for pain experience. I actually did not look to see how they defined injury on here, but I think they probably used the British Journal of Sports Medicine's definition, which, as we know, is a little loose. A complaint is how it started. This is another study looking at the exact same thing. Well, different group, but the effect of stress on pain. Lower levels of mood, sleep duration, academic stress, increased levels of energy were able to predict injury. So it shows these kids, footballers, there was a spike in injury, but it wasn't necessarily for anything training related. It was interns, or midterms rather. So that added stress, added to injury, and that's something we can all kind of keep an eye on. Okay, next. So I should say, I'm going to go, you don't have to go back to that last slide, Hannah, but something, because we work with so many athletes that follow seasons, race seasons, climbing seasons, those sorts of things. Very often, people will think, oh, my knee is starting to kill me. This happens every time in my training. And 2 weeks out from this event, all of a sudden they're like, yeah, my knee is killing me. But is it their training load? Or is it that the event is 2 weeks away and all of a sudden you have this allostatic stressor on top of you, and you don't realize you just relate it to this tissue? Or very often we do. I shouldn't, not all of us. So, but it's a much more like a non-linear interpretation of a pain experience is to realize that we are a dynamical system and there are many things that contribute to our pain. And that actually very often will help bring down your pain if you can bring a different context to it. So allostasis is defined as a process maintaining homeostasis through adaptive changes, organism's internal environment, needs perceived, and anticipated demands. So this is where we all kind of like hope to live, right? Is in that homeostasis, where everything kind of is humming right along, going great. I used a sailboat there for even keel. They look like they're just nice and relaxed, I'll read your question in just 1 second, Matthew. So this is the allostatic load. This is a really cool study put out a few years ago. And if you guys can zoom in on that little graph, that's showing the contributors that they estimate that you can consider when considering low back pain. You can see it's a lot more complicated than just, you have a slipped disc. So there are very many moving parts to pain experience. Okay, Matthew. The question is, much of your focus is, of course, on the rehab and training, but I am very interested in how this approach might translate to event performance any specific pain management techniques that might be useful, that pain cave, in the pain cave, or that might be practiced in training to prepare for it. So that's a great question. Watching these allostatic stressors. So when I had my shoulder injury or pain experience, as I prefer to say, I had some big life things going on, and my stress level was at a point that I really probably should just allowed myself to pull back as an athlete a little bit and deal with those other things, instead of trying to whack every mole in the world. But I didn't have the same perspective as I do now. I had the structuralist model approach, so I thought that there was some structure in my shoulder that was causing my pain. So watching these, when you come up to your events, during your training cycle, watch what other allostatic stressors are in your life. Monitor those things, and if you realize, like, oh, my alcohol consumption is affecting my sleep, and that's affecting my marriage, and that's affecting, so monitor those things and realize, actually the rule that I typically tell people to use, funny enough, is the Pareto principle, otherwise known as the 80-20 rule. So yeah, so if you look at your allostatic stressors, and the biggest movers of those stressors, try to take care of those and know that they'll probably solve the bulk of the other ones. So another tool that might does relate to Matthew's question is cognitive reframing. So it's a knowing that pain isn't reflective of damage in your tissue is very helpful. Knowing that you're not injuring yourself further if you do have a flare up. Just knowing that this is a part of the process and you can move with it, engage with it, stay active, is a very helpful tool when you're in the heat of it in a training season. Practicing some psychological flexibility. This is something that does take practice. Another term for it is psychological reactance. So if you can learn to practice some, actually even just meditation and things like that, will give you some advantage when it comes to psychological reactance or psychological flexibility. The reason I use tomatoes here is because I like to tell people, in our model, we have a fix-it mentality. I have people say that all the time to me, and I used to use those terms all the time. So yeah, we want to fix it, and we want it to be over, and that's just not how health works. So health is much more like a garden and not like a garage, and that's a better way to think about it. So if you think, if you think of tending to a garden and taking care of your health, taking care of yourself, instead of fixing something that you expect to go away forever, then it will lead to less frustration along the way. We actually have a garden. We lost all of our tomatoes, and it was sad last year. So, yeah, but just know that you grow tomatoes, okay? Okay, when I talk about starting and stopping is the pattern that I see with folks. They, will have a pain experience, or they'll start training, have a pain experience, they rest, and then they try to go back to training, but then they're deconditioned, and all of a sudden you end up in this cycle of reactance where you're like, oh, I knew it, I hurt again, and I hurt myself again. I'm going to stop, I'm going to rest, and then I'm going to come back to it. But if you could get right in the middle and try to ride the middle of it a little more consistently, with less extreme, then a lot of times you'll come out the other side of it. The 80-20 rule, everybody talks about zone 2 is the popular way of saying it now. Spend a lot of time in zone 2. So, which, actually that is a bunch of benefits. Stay in that little middle area it's very useful. But when you live on the extremes, it's going to be really frustrating. There was something else. Oh, my friend Tim Gabbett has the acute to chronic workload ratio. You can use that also. It's a very useful tool. None of these are going to bulletproof, but they will lead to a very consistent way of staying active and doing what we all love to do. So I get asked these questions all the time, so I felt like I just would wrap up my talk with some response to it, because I think maybe somebody will ask me at some point. So adjunctive care. What would I call adjunctive care at this point? I can tell you some of the things. So efficacy is a huge part of a pain experience, and you building your efficacy is very important. And by me saying that, I'm saying you taking care of yourself in this process is really helpful. So you spending time doing that, like training your time out, doing what you need to do. Adjunctive care is those things that I would call, I have tons of friends that are massage therapists and acupuncturists and every other thing out there. And these things have their place. Absolutely. Okay. There are people in my little world that would say they're a waste of time. I do not feel that way. But I would say to use them like ketchup and mustard or some other condiment, meaning they will never fill you up. The things that you need, you have, and you will bring to the table. But those little adjunctive products, I would just use like a condiment, if that makes sense. They're nothing to live on. You're just going to always be a little hungry, if that makes sense. If it's something you just really enjoy, yeah, go ahead. But if you're expecting it to change your life, it's going to leave you a little hungry. So that's my little piece on that. Luck favors the prepared, darling. So I love this little thing. It's from The Incredibles, and it's pretty accurate also. Living in that zone, that nice little happy zone of staying active, doing what we love to do, can lead to a lot of miles and smiles down the road, and some frustrating times also, I should say. Bees, honey comes with bees. That's just part of how these things go. In conclusion, do you guys have any more? Oh yeah, I see a question over here. Any thoughts on specific management in the moment? Yeah, mantras are a go-to. I've had some people tell me, I do not know any research that backs this. I know that mantras actually have some evidence behind them. But distraction, I know that, with pickle juice, we've all heard, drink the pickle juice, it'll restore your sodium, and that'll keep you from cramping. But we know that it's the shock of the pickle juice, it's not the sodium. So that changes your cramps. So you could try some distraction, things of that nature might help. I should say too, if any of you guys want to know more about this, this isn't me upselling you. It would actually might be very helpful. If you purchase a copy of Pain and Performance, it might flesh this out even a little more for you. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Much appreciate you taking the time.